Welcome to my channel, The Binge Eating Therapist. I'm Sarah, former binge eater turned psychotherapist, and my mission is to use this space to bring content to you to help you understand your struggle with food and break free from binge eating. Now this video is part 2 of the 7 steps to overcoming binge eating. So if you haven't seen part 1, you may want to check that out. I'll link to it above, and then come back and watch part 2. So we did the first 3 steps in part 1, and those steps were to let go of intentional weight loss, to spend time in stillness and self-reflection, and to separate yourself from your binge eating urges. So moving on to step 4, and step 4 is inspired by the divine Eckhart Tolle, and step 4 is to accept this moment as if you had chosen it. So what does it mean, first of all, to accept this moment? Well, I would say to accept the moment is just about this moment. People struggle with acceptance because they think if they accept now, they're somehow accepting a certain type of future. And by this moment, we're talking about what's already happening or going on. So if this moment is a feeling and people are, or you're saying to yourself, I shouldn't be feeling this way, that is not accepting the moment. The feeling is already here. You are feeling this way. So if you say to yourself, I shouldn't be feeling like this, or this feels terrible and I have to get rid of this feeling, by refusing to accept the moment, you feel this sense of urgency to change the moment or to escape the moment. And that could very easily lead to picking up food and starting to binge, right? It also doesn't mean that we don't take any responsibility for the moment either. But it's about accepting those things that are already happening that we can't change. If you've just binged, you cannot change the fact that you've just binged. And to be beating yourself up about it and to ruminating about it and feeling awful about what you've done, it's like you're trying to take responsibility for something that's no longer your responsibility because it's done. Your responsibility is just about how you want to respond now and what next. So we just lose so much emotional and mental energy when we argue with what's going on now. When we can accept what's going on now, there's a peace, a release, a sense of freedom where you can then make a choice. Now this is something that I think needs to be experienced before you can really appreciate the magnitude of what this means. And I've had those moments where something's been really stressful, or I've been experiencing it as stressful, and when I've accepted it for exactly how it is, it's like I feel transformed in that moment. There's a sense of, I can't even explain what the feeling is, and each time I do it I get frustrated with myself. I'm like, why can't I just do this all the time? Why can't I live in a state of perpetual acceptance? Because I really think that would be an amazing way to live, but maybe as humans we just have to, I don't know, maybe it's not possible, maybe some people do manage it, but yeah, it's a work in progress. But it's exactly why these steps are steps. They're works in progress. It's not about doing any of these things perfectly. So just the idea of working steps kind of helps to move away from the black and white thinking that can be so problematic with binge eating. And then step number 5 is to find a way of eating for you that promotes freedom and balance. Those 2 words I think are just so key. So if you're not binging, what does your relationship with food look like instead? You may have no memory of what a good relationship with food looks like. So I quite like intuitive eating because I think it's a good framework and it has a lot of freedom in it, and there's an element of balance as well. So some people think they ought to give up, or they want to give up certain foods, and whilst that would never have worked for me because it would have taken away my sense of freedom and made me want to binge more. However, there are people who report that they genuinely feel freer for giving up certain foods. So rather than focusing on what is it you're eating, if the focus and the intention is around freedom and balance, then hopefully you'll start to kind of forge a path that makes sense for you. Having balance and variety in our food is important. Our bodies do need a variety of food, but feeling free to make choices is crucial, particularly for anybody who has struggled with an eating disorder, such as binge eating disorder. So this step, I appreciate, sounds basic, and there's a lot of work within this step to figure things out, but my encouragement would be to approach it in a playful way, and actually this is easier to do if you've done step 1 that day and you're not focused on intentional weight loss. Instead, you're focusing on feeling free and balanced and just wanting to try and eat in a way that feels good on all levels. Then that, is what's going to help you to create something new, and to develop a way of eating that just, it works for you, it serves you, and it stops food from dominating your life. And step number 6 might sound a little bit out of place. You may wonder, what on earth has that got to do with binge eating? And again, this is also inspired by a phrase of Eckhart Tolle's. And step 6 is to practice high quality yeses and nos. So what does that mean? Well, it's about boundaries. And something that I've just seen again and again in people who struggle with binge eating is they really struggle to say no to people. And you'll know if this is you by, do you get stressed out when people keep asking things of you? And do you sometimes feel resentful when you say yes to things that you don't really want to say yes to? If so, you're really struggling with your high quality yeses or nos. They're of not great quality. If you know that you can always say no to somebody and that that's okay, then people can ask you whatever they want, right? It doesn't matter. People get to ask whatever they want of you, and you get to say yes or no. So if you want the problem to go away because you want people to just stop asking you for stuff, it creates this perpetual sense of like burnout and giving and not being able to, feeling like you can take anything for yourself, And the other one, there's a lovely example given by Brooke Castillo on her podcast, The Life Coach School, and I think it's a podcast episode actually about urges. And she talks about the urge. It's like a child in the supermarket having a tantrum that they want something. If you're someone who really struggles to say no, you'll watch that child seeming to be suffering and be like, this is unbearable to see them feeling so distressed. I'm going to say yes. As opposed to saying no, which would possibly be in the best interest of the child, right? Because maybe the thing they want isn't appropriate, or maybe it also reinforces that the way to get something is by having a tantrum and a meltdown, which isn't going to be great for socialization or relationships going forward, right? So sometimes those binge urges, watching them play out, that part of you having a tantrum almost. I can remember one time wanting to go out and buy binge foods and sort of trying to get myself to stop and recognize and just reflect on what I was doing before I did it. And I can remember literally sort of holding myself back at the door. I think I'd even got my coat on and just being like, just watch this first. And as I held myself there, like literally, maybe I did, maybe I didn't, but I certainly had that real edge. I wanted to just stamp my feet. But in that moment and in that intention to separate myself from the binge urge and to watch my child having a tantrum about wanting to go and binge, I suddenly felt freer and I was able to say no on that occasion. So this idea that our relationship with other people is a reflection of our relationship with ourselves. So other people can act as mirrors, and when we start saying no to other people, or yes, if we're struggling to say yes, that could be the case as well, that starts to translate to being able to say yes and no to ourselves more appropriately based on what's in the best interest for us overall. And then the last step, step 7, is to connect with others who are on the same journey. This was one of the bits that I found so helpful and powerful about going to OA, was sitting and listening and then connecting with other people who knew what it was like to struggle with food. You might not be able to meet people in person, but we have these online platforms now where you can find anybody struggling with the same thing that you are. So it would be, if you're seeing somebody commenting on someone's post about binge eating, that you might even just connect in a kind of a Me Too comment, although Me Too on social media means something a little bit different. So maybe a hashtag same here, so as not to confuse things. But that idea of asking for support and giving support, it's a big part of the 12-step program. It's a big part of the group therapy. And I just think it's incredibly powerful because it really gets to work as well on the shame. When we feel connected to other people, it makes the whole experience less isolating. When we have compassion for other people who are doing the same thing that we are, that helps us to start developing some self-compassion for ourselves as well. And I just think that something extraordinary happens when people come together with a common interest or purpose. So finding ways to connect with other people. And on that note, I decided to start doing these Connect and Recover workshops, which is sort of 3 hours in a group of 8. So there's a bit of an opportunity to get to know people a little bit and to share, and then sort of move into groups online going forward to support one another. So if you're interested in those, I'll stick a link below and you can have a look at that and get in touch. But otherwise, I'm going to leave it there, and I will see you on the next video.